Welcome back to the fourth installment of our deep dive into the legend side of the Great Galactic War. When we last left off, the New Republic had finally made its way to Coruscant and reclaimed the historic seat of the Republic. But not every loose end had been tidied up. In today's episode, we'll be following along as the New Republic went on a few hunts across the stars. Some of the people they were hunting were former Imperial admirals, now turned warlords. Others were Imperial politicians that had escaped justice.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
As you'll remember from our last entry, after the death of the Emperor, many powerful Imperials turned into local warlords, maintaining control over formerly Imperial territories. One of them was Zsinj, a man the New Republic made top priority after the liberation of Coruscant. Zsinj was a human male from Fondor, son to Marisa Zsinj, an admiral in the former Republic security forces. After the Empire had taken over, Marisa went rogue aboard her Venator-class star destroyer, Retaliation, and interfered with Imperial ships. Her son, Zsinj, was granted command of the Victory-class star destroyer Iron Fist and told to take down his own mother, which he did, earning himself the title of Warlord of the Empire. After the death of Palpatine, Zsinj was widely considered the most powerful post-Imperial warlord, and many believed he would rise up to take the seat of the Emperor. Instead, Zsinj set up a base on Sereno, began absorbing the forces of his rival warlords, and built a powerful economy. By the Battle of Dathomir, he controlled a third of the known galaxy. While the New Republic made their way toward Coruscant, Zsinj began testing their fleet with his own, leading to many small skirmishes or incidents that resulted in him and General Han Solo becoming personal rivals. His interference was supported by Usan Isard, the self-declared Empress. Despite Zsinj's harassment, the New Republic did make it to Coruscant, forcing Isard to flee to Thyferra. After the liberation of Coruscant and the routing of Usan Isard, Zsinj was next on the New Republic's list. Despite, or perhaps because of their rivalry, General Han Solo was put in charge of what became known as the Zsinj Campaign. After the liberation of Coruscant, Zsinj had acquired even more Imperial assets under his banner, such as star destroyers and parts of Isard's intelligence network. He had also expanded his territory, controlling his vast forces from his headquarters, aptly named Rancor Base on the planet Dathomir. Alongside General Han Solo, Captain Wedge Antilles was involved in the Zsinj campaign, as was Wraith Squadron. The latter were instrumental in countering Zsinj's forces, thanks to their skills in subterfuge, espionage, and infiltration. Although it was called a campaign, the fight against Zsinj was less a series of carefully plotted out battles aimed at eating away at his territory and assets, and more of a hodgepodge medley of half-cooked schemes and plots. There were many small-scale conflicts scattered across the galaxy between Zsinj's fleet and the New Republic forces. The New Republic was able to obtain critical information on Zsinj's secret support network, but Zsinj stayed ahead of their attempts to eliminate his high-ranking officers by deploying decoys. He also tried to have Wraith Squadron assassinated on Coruscant, but when the attempt failed, he had inadvertently revealed how deep his agents had penetrated the New Republic security. Wraith Squadron retaliated by posing as pirates. Intelligence had revealed that Zsinj was in the habit of hiring mercenary pirates to fight alongside his forces, so Wraith Squadron posed as the Hawkbat Independent Space Force, as their pirate gang was called, in an operation dubbed the Halmad Law. Their antics caught Zsinj's attention, and he invited the so-called pirate gang aboard his flagship, the Iron Fist, to meet with him. During what was essentially a job interview, Zsinj revealed his intent to launch a large-scale attack on what he referred to as an orbital refueling and trade station, which was later identified as Kuat Drive Yards. His goal was to steal the new Executor-class destroyer Razor Kiss that Kuat Drive Yards were developing for the Empire, as he feared the ship would be powerful enough to seriously threaten his fleet. Under the guise of mercenaries, Wraith Squadron worked alongside Zsinj to steal the ship, but in reality, they were sabotaging him at every possible turn. At a critical junction in the operation, Solo and his fleet appeared out of nowhere, challenging Zsinj's own forces. The two fleets fought over the Razor Kiss, and although Zsinj had been caught by surprise, he appeared to be winning. Luckily, Wraith Squadron was able to destroy the ship before it fell into Zsinj's hands. In retaliation for the loss, Zsinj fired back with several projects designed to wreak havoc on the New Republic. First was Project Minefield, during which he had large numbers of non-human New Republic government and fleet members brainwashed. Project Funeral followed, and it saw many key operatives planted near the brainwashed officials. When these sleeper agents used the keyword to activate the brainwashing, the affected sowed chaos. In the aftermath, not only had several key New Republic government members been assassinated, but animosity had also spread between humans and non-humans, much like Isard had done before him. Another operation, Project Blunted Razor, used the debris of the Razor Kiss to prototype a new ship known as the Second Death. Solo and his team, meanwhile, were slowly getting the better of Zsinj and his forces, pushing them back in many small conflicts. Zsinj was doing his best to hold his forces together, but the financial and material cost of holding off the New Republic had taken a heavy toll on his empire, which had begun fraying at the edges. Moving forward, he set out 5 simple objectives to regain control. First, he needed to recover his flagship, which had been stolen during one of the clashes with the New Republic. Then, he had to save his secret support network from being dismantled. After that, all he had to do was kill Han Solo, retreat to his headquarters in Rancor Base, and devise a new genius plan to conquer the galaxy anew. Predictably, this easy 5-step plan didn't go as swimmingly as Zsinj had hoped. His quest to kill Han Solo saw his forces taking on the New Republic fleet at many points across the galaxy, and they systematically lost each time, being pushed further and further back into his territory. In the end, Zsinj was forced to execute his escape plan and retreat to Dathomir early. Meanwhile, a very decidedly alive Han Solo returned to Coruscant only to find his love interest, Princess Leia Organa, contemplating a marriage of convenience to Isolde of the Hapan Consortium. Realizing he had little to offer the princess, Solo set out to win her back with an extravagant gift. As one does, he won the entire planet of Dathomir in a game of Sabacc from Omog, the Drakmarian warlord, and it was this entire planet that he offered to Leia as a gift, suggesting it as a replacement for her homeworld of Alderaan, which now lay in pieces. This totally reasonable plan failed, however, when it was discovered that Dathomir really belonged to Zsinj. In true Solo fashion, Han resigned as a general, kidnapped Leia, and brought her to Dathomir to take the planet back. From orbit, they spotted Zsinj's shipyard and massive fleet, with one minor complication: they were spotted back. As Zsinj's fleet fired on them, they were forced to crash land on Dathomir, where they were immediately confronted by the Night Sisters. A minor detail to note here is that, at this time, there was a conflict on Dathomir between the Night Sisters and the Force Witches of the Singing Mountain clan. Neither were on Zsinj's side. Rather, this was an independent conflict happening while the Warlord was occupying most of the planet. Luke Skywalker, meanwhile, had followed Han and his sister to Dathomir and had watched as they crash landed on the surface. He followed them planetside, but was also captured by the Night Sisters and reunited with the other 2 prisoners. Knowing Han Solo was planetside, Zsinj prepared to capture him from aboard his flagship in orbit. What few knew was that Zsinj had set up a superweapon known as the Orbital Night Cloak, a series of satellites that, once deployed, would render any planet a dark, frozen wasteland devoid of life. Before starting negotiations, he activated the superweapon, which started darkening the skies of the planet. Once his threat was abundantly clear, he reached out to Gethzerion, the leader of the Night Sisters, and demanded she relinquish Solo to him. With the Night Cloak threatening them, Gethzerion agreed to hand Solo over in exchange for a shuttle that would allow her Night Sisters to escape Dathomir before it was too late. Zsinj agreed to these terms and sent one of his officers, General Melvar, to meet her with 2 shuttles, one armed for himself and Solo, and one unarmed for the Night Sisters to leave. In a surprising betrayal, Gethzerion killed Melvar and stole the armed shuttle, making a break for orbit. Luckily for some parties, Luke Skywalker, who was nearby, was able to call on the Force more powerfully than ever before, besting the Night Sisters and managing to free Solo before they left in the shuttle. Skywalker, Organa, and Solo followed behind on board the Millennium Falcon, from where Skywalker continued using the Force to assist Zsinj's fleet in destroying the fleeing Night Sister shuttle. However, once their common enemy was defeated, he turned his attention to the Night Cloak satellites, destroying them one by one and ending its threat before it could destroy Dathomir. With their brief alliance over, Zsinj ordered his forces to destroy the Millennium Falcon. However, it was too late. From within the cockpit, Skywalker was able to sense Zsinj through the Force and pointed out his flagship to Solo, who took the wheel and went straight for him. Dodging the fleet's efforts to destroy him, he fired off his last 2 concussion missiles, told Zsinj to kiss his Wookiee over direct comlink before turning him into space dust, ending the warlord that would be Emperor. With Zsinj dead, the Hapan fleet, led by Isolde, Leia's potential spouse, moved into Dathomir space and took out Zsinj's shipyard from orbit. They also captured or destroyed many of the ships in his fleet. With Zsinj gone and the Night Sisters dead, Han Solo relinquished Dathomir into the hands of the Force Witches, who soon brought their homeworld into the New Republic. But not everything was golden. Zsinj had been the greatest threat to the New Republic for 4 years, but at the same time, he had also been an enemy to the Imperial remnants. With him gone, the Empire was once again free to turn their full attention to the New Republic. Worse still, those of Zsinj's forces who had managed to survive the Battle of Dathomir, as it was later called, now had no leader. Directionless, they took to random terror attacks on the New Republic or joined the Empire. Some were taken in by independent warlords such as Teradok, who tried to take over planets in the Gondian Reach and declared himself the High Admiral of the Mid-Rim. Between the Empire and the New Republic, he lasted all of 2 seconds. As for Zsinj's vast territory, the Empire took the western half, and the eastern half was controlled by the New Republic, including Kuat at long last. But this wasn't the end of the New Republic's cleanup campaign, not by a long shot. Between the liberation of Coruscant and the Battle of Dathomir, the New Republic kind of put its blinders on and put all its eggs into the Zsinj campaign's basket. But that doesn't mean no other operations happened during this time, and one of them was particularly important despite its small scale. This was the Bacta War, which was kicked off by the liberation of Coruscant and ended in one more Thrawn being yoinked out of the New Republic side. Bacta was, as we're sure you all know already, an organic chemical substance that was used to heal wounds rapidly while preventing scar tissue formation. It was made by combining gelatinous red alazi and cayenne bacterial particles, and then the resulting fluid was mixed with a thick fluid known as embori. After its invention, Bacta soon replaced Colto as the galaxy's go-to medical fluid, which naturally made it incredibly valuable to every faction. Now, as you may know, Bacta had been invented by the Vratics on the mid-rim planet of Thyferra, and if that name rings a bell, it's because we mentioned it in our previous installment of Galactic Civil War history. This was the planet that Yusan Isard had fled to aboard her super star destroyer Lusankya after she released the Kratos virus on Coruscant. Alongside her flagship, she took a fleet of Imperial ships and flew to Thyferra, knowing that, by controlling the galaxy's supply of Bacta, she would have a significant upper hand in the Galactic Civil War. Thyferra was already not the most stable of planets at the time. The Zhukfra Corporation had just launched a planet-wide coup, which led to the Zaltan Corporation losing significant power. These were the only 2 Bacta manufacturers in the galaxy, and by teaming up with Isard and destabilizing their competition, Zhukfra had taken the Bacta monopoly for themselves. Isard was appointed Zhukfra's COO upon arriving at Thyferra, and former Moff Fleary Voru was appointed CFO. Arisi Delarit, a former member of Rogue Squadron, had revealed herself as an Imperial mole and had now managed to secure a leadership position in the Thyferran Home Defense Corps. Of course, the New Republic couldn't allow the Empire to control the galaxy's supply of Bacta, and as a bonus note, they really needed to take Isard down. Rogue Squadron considered retaking Thyferra an immediate priority. As a bonus, Corran Horn, a member of Rogue Squadron, also had a personal mission to rescue a prisoner he had once been imprisoned beside aboard the Lusankya, who was none other than the famed rebel general Jan Dodner. Remember those blinkers we mentioned just before? Well, the New Republic was so focused on Zsinj that they refused to authorize the mission to Thyferra, especially since all that had technically happened on the planet was a few new people getting high-ranking jobs in a corporation. Rogue Squadron, understandably, didn't take this very well and proceeded to resign from their positions en masse, save for Pash Kraken, who was told to remain behind by Wedge Antilles so they could quash any future rumors that their mission had been authorized. This would absolve the New Republic of any responsibility and subsequently spare them any potential political backlash. After resigning, Antilles and the other members of Rogue Squadron left their HQ and went looking for a new base. Meanwhile, Kraken, who had resumed his previous role as an A-Wing captain, was ordered to destroy a space station above Yagdul, once controlled by Zsinj. This station became the Rogues' new base, and to keep its location secret, they forged documents claiming it had been destroyed. The New Republic, on the other hand, had to quickly reform Rogue Squadron since it was such a symbol of its military strength. When getting rid of the squadron's previous equipment, the former support staff all resigned and made off with the equipment, including the squadron's X-Wings. Antilles and his men secured several caches of parts, and with the donation of ample credits and several connections, they ended up with all their starfighters, plenty of spare parts, and a squad of Twi'lek pilots in their Chidaki fighters as support. Rogue Squadron also managed to secure an alliance with the Ashern, a resistance groups against the Vratiks of Thyferra, as well as with the remnants of the Zaltan Corporation. The first conflicts of the Back to War were small terrorist strikes from the ground as the resistance groups targeted Jukfra, while Rogue Squadron ambushed Thyferran convoys and refineries, liberating Bacta, which they either sold to finance their war or gave to the New Republic to help fight the Krytos virus. Isard, pissed by these annoyances, tried to wipe the Rogues out and did wipe out a colony that had accepted stolen Bacta from them as retaliation. In a series of hit-and-run raids, the Rogues managed to destroy several of Isard's Star Destroyers, as well as her smaller Victory-class ship, the Corruptor. They even managed to bribe the crew of the Imperial-class Star Destroyer Avarice to defect. But all this was just setting the stage for the 4-phase plan to end the Bacta War once and for all. Phase 1 began with Antilles intentionally leaking the location of their base, drawing Isard and her forces to Yagdul. She immediately dispatched the Lusankya and the Virulence to destroy the space station. Just as the Lusankya dropped out of hyperspace, Rogue Squadron made the jump to lightspeed, departing for Thyferra. Captain Joak Dryso, the Lusankya's commanding officer, sent out his fighters, but the station was ready. Booster Terek, who was in command of the base, used the base's heavy lift tractor beams and a gravity well projector to trap the Star Destroyer. Once the Lusankya was trapped, he aimed 300 proton torpedo launchers at her. It was a bluff, but the Imperials didn't know that. To protect the Lusankya, the Virulence got in between her and the torpedoes, breaking the target locks. Dryso gave the command to retreat immediately. However, on a complete coincidence, Captain Kraken's squadron arrived just then, creating the illusion that this was a well-planned New Republic trap. The Virulence immediately surrendered, but the Lusankya had made her escape once more. At least, her fighters had been left behind and taken into custody. With the Battle of Yagdul concluded, Terek and Kraken set off for Thyferra to support Antilles. While the Battle of Yagdul was happening, Rogue Squadron had arrived above Thyferra and engaged the Thyferran Home Defense Corps' interceptors, which were led by Dalarit. When the Lusankya arrived after fleeing Yagdul, it was followed close behind by 2 ships, the Valiant and the Freedom, which had once been Isard's own Avarice. The 2 late arrivals took the Lusankya on while the Rogues fired off thousands of proton torpedoes and concussion missiles. But that was only Phase 2 of the plan. Phase 3 was already happening on the ground below. Remember the resistance groups we mentioned earlier? While the space battle was going on above Thyferra, Elskol Loro and Lelo Asiri led a joint team of Zaltsan and Ashern rebels to assail Isard's palace. They succeeded in breaching the palace's defenses, which prompted Isard to flee the planet once more. She seemingly took Voru's personal shuttle, the Thyphonian, while leaving Voru behind to be captured. With Isard aboard the Thyphonian and ascending rapidly into orbit, she ordered the Lusankya to cover her escape. This began the fourth and final phase of the plan, the conclusion of the space battle. At this stage, the Freedom had suffered extensive damage and Rogue Squadron had run out of missiles. This was where Imperial arrogance comes into play. Captain Dryso, the Lusankya's commander, could see victory within his grasp. Convinced he could overwhelm the New Republic ships, he disobeyed Isard's command to flee. When the Virulence dropped out of hyperspace, he thought reinforcements had arrived and he was about to secure his win. What Dryso didn't know, because he had fled Yagdul first, was that the Virulence had surrendered and was now commandeered by Booster Terrik and carrying 3 A-Wing interceptor squadrons, including Kraken's Aqua Squadron. With the reinforcements arriving for Rogue Squadron, the Lusankya didn't stand a chance. Realizing he had lost, Dryso prepared to ram the Star Destroyer into Thyferra as a final FU, but was executed by his lieutenant before he could waste all of their lives. Now in command of the Lusankya, the lieutenant surrendered. As she was arriving on the scene, Isard commanded Dalarit's TIE fighters to cover her. Koran Horn took her on one-on-one and shot her down, then proceeded to destroy Isard's shuttle before she could jump to hyperspace and escape. In the aftermath of the Battle of Thyferra, there were many New Republic victories to celebrate. Isard was presumed dead and Zhukfra Corporation was disbanded, leaving the New Republic allied Zaltan Corporation as the sole Bacta manufacturer in the galaxy. Meanwhile, Rogue Squadron discovered that their resignations had been misfiled, which meant that their victory above Thyferra was, in fact, a New Republic victory. They were all invited to rejoin the Navy, which they all accepted. As their first mission, they were tasked with tracking down the Lusankya's prisoners, which had unfortunately been moved to a different location. However, the brief Bacta embargo had resulted in thousands of casualties across the New Republic. Worse still, unbeknownst to everyone, Isard had never actually gotten aboard the Thyphonian. Her escape attempt had been a ruse designed to throw the New Republic off her trail. The shuttle was remote controlled, and when Horn destroyed it, she was presumed dead and allowed to slink off to join the Imperial remnant. She wouldn't resurface for many years to come, not until the Thrawn campaign was in full swing. Unfortunately for the New Republic, the Thrawn campaign came all too soon, and before they knew it, they were doing everything they could to prevent Grand Admiral Thrawn from destroying everything they had worked for and reinstating the Galactic Empire. After the Battle of Dathomir and the New Republic victory against Zsinj, what had been left of Imperial space shrunk to a quarter of its former size. Not only did they lose territory, but the material cost had also skyrocketed, leaving Imperial officers with rookie and untrained recruits. However, the New Republic wasn't doing much better. As we discussed earlier, the Zsinj campaign had taken an incredibly heavy toll on both sides. With Kuat nearly destroyed, the two factions were left trying to poach ships off each other or get lesser shipyards to supply them with new vessels to replenish their exhausted fleets. With both sides in difficult straits, Mon Mothma ordered a pause on all New Republic operations in 8 ABY to give the fledgling government a chance to recover. Her reasoning was that the New Republic controlled most of the economic assets. By pausing operations, she would lead the New Republic in rebuilding its government and integrate newly annexed territories, becoming stronger while the Empire grew ever poorer and weaker. At this time, Imperial space extended beyond the Hydian Way in the new territories. Meanwhile, New Republic space stretched along the Selenon Spur from Ord Mantell and south of the Polemian. Between them, Zsinj's former empire was a region of mixed loyalties known as the Borderland regions. For some time, an uneasy peace lasted between the two factions. That peace broke when, in 9 ABY, Grand Admiral Thrawn returned from the unknown regions and took command of the Imperial fleet. With the legendary hero of the Galactic Empire back in command, not to mention one of the most famous for his tactical genius, the Empire was revitalized. Thrawn immediately threw himself into a new campaign against the New Republic from aboard his flagship, the Chimera. with Captain Gillard Peleon as his second in command. By crushing pirates and rogue warlords in Imperial space, he united the Moffs, but their support was only nominal. Although Thrawn had a dozen Star Destroyers at his disposal, the Moffs and Imperial Council maintained their own independent military assets. Of these 12, only half were fully loyal. These 6 were led by Thrawn himself aboard the Chimera, and the other 6 were commanded by Captain Dorja aboard the Relentless. In the early days of the Thrawn campaign, the Chiss Admiral sent out single Star Destroyers to attack New Republic worlds in the borderland regions just to test their reaction. His first goal was expanding the number of ships under his command, either by stealing New Republic capital ships or by taking back the lost Katana fleet and man it with an army of clones. To create these clones, Thrawn helped himself to Palpatine's spare Spartai cloning cylinders, but we'll talk about those later on. With his army of cloned super warriors at the ready, Thrawn was ready to launch his direct assault on the New Republic. Relying on the ancient stateless strategy, he struck where the New Republic wasn't, forcing them to either spread their forces thin or gather their forces in a few key locations. The Chiss targeted several inner and mid-rim worlds. A feint at Bafush allowed him to instead raid Nikolon, where he stole 51 mole miners he planned on using to steal more Republic ships. With the mole miners he had stolen, Thrawn then targeted the shipyards of Sluis Van. He almost succeeded in stealing nearly 100 ships, but Lando Calrissian was able to use the miners to disable the ships, denying them to Thrawn, but also the New Republic. Back on Coruscant, Thrawn scored a much more significant victory. He orchestrated the arrest of Admiral Ackbar, his greatest rival. Unbeknownst to the New Republic, Thrawn had activated a secret Clone Wars-era surveillance system within the Imperial Palace that transmitted audio back to him, supplying him with critical intel. The New Republic realized they had a leak, but without knowing the surveillance system, they suspected an actual hidden agent. Thrawn succeeded in planting intelligence that implicated Admiral Ackbar, leading to his arrest as an Imperial spy. Despite his loss at Sluis Van, Thrawn continued harassing the New Republic across the galaxy, forcing the New Republic to either abandon entire regions or commit more ships to their defense. In his quest for new ships, he sought out the Katana fleet, a fleet of 200 Dreadnought-class heavy cruisers that had disappeared before the Clone Wars when a hive virus took out their crew. In the ensuing battle, he recovered 178 of the Dreadnoughts, which brought up the timeline for his main campaign. Armed with his new ships, Thrawn attacked the Corellian Run. He feinted at Ando, Filver, and Crondre, tricking the New Republic fleet at Ord Padron to fly out to defend those worlds, only for Thrawn to swoop in and destroy the military base they had just sortied before capturing Yukio, a major agri-world. With Thrawn's forces advancing, some worlds prepared to join forces with him while warlords in the deep core began stirring. This caused the New Republic to double down on its defenses at Coruscant, Kashyyyk, Bothawoy, and Mon Cala, but they continued taking heavy losses. Thrawn besieged Kataris and Quat Christak, further stretching the New Republic's forces thin. His attack on Wystrel and subsequent capture of Ord Mantell and Generis destabilized the New Republic's control over the region. From Niklon, he stole even more resources. Time and time again, New Republic fleets were crushed all over. With another feint at Marist, Thrawn drew out the Coruscant sector fleet, allowing him to attack the capital directly. Although the New Republic tried to repel his attack, he deployed 24 cloaked asteroids, which blockaded the planet. Although there were only 24 asteroids, he had equipped them with beacons that would make the New Republic think there were over 300. This moment became known as the Siege of Coruscant, memorable because Thrawn managed to keep Coruscant out of the war without committing almost any resources to it. With Thrawn running ramshod through the New Republic, countless systems either declared neutrality or pledged themselves anew to the Empire. With defeat in sight, the New Republic had to do something. In 9 ABY, near the end of the Thrawn campaign, the New Republic finally caught a break. After considerable effort, they were able to locate Thrawn's cloning facilities on Mount Tantiss. Before we get into that story, however, we should go over Mount Tantiss' complicated history. Tantiss was a mountain located on a planet known as Wayland in the Outer Rim. Although it seemed like a lush, tropical world of no real importance, it actually housed an Imperial research facility filled with horrors. Imperial Research Station 61, as it was known, had once been run by Zeta Magnus, a mad genetic terrorist known for such works as unleashing the blue virus during the Clone Wars or stone mites on the core worlds. During the Clone Wars, the CIS had used Wayland to study new methods of cloning in an effort to create a Morgukai shadow army. After the Clone Wars, Palpatine turned Wayland into his personal treasury, locking away various treasures into the vast fortress. At the same time, he fitted the research facility with several Spartai cloning cylinders the Empire had salvaged from Katao, which he used to further his own goal, creating perfect clones of himself to ensure there was always an Emperor on the throne. As you all know, he succeeded, and at the time of the Thrawn campaign's end, Clone Palpatine was already active on Biss, calling back some of the Imperial forces and encouraging others to remain in the deep core instead of aiding Thrawn. But we're jumping ahead. Early on in his crusade, we mentioned Thrawn had used these cloning cylinders to create an army that would fly his new fleet. It wasn't easy. The rapid acceleration process the Tantiss facility had used had a habit of producing mad, unstable clones which weren't great qualities to have in an army. To prevent this, Thrawn travelled to Micah and gathered several Salamiri, lizards that could create a force-blocking bubble around them. The lizards were also Thrawn's way of dealing with the facility's guardian, a mad clone of Jedi Master Jorus C'baoth, known as Jorus C'baoth. With the clone Jedi under his control and an army of clones manning his ships, Thrawn was ready to launch his attack on the New Republic. Now, almost a year later, the New Republic had finally figured out the location of Thrawn's cloning facilities, which quickly became a priority target in their desperate bid to stop Thrawn from dismantling everything they'd worked for. The information came from Mara Jade, the former Emperor's hand. She'd been arrested by the New Republic, and in exchange for her freedom, she told Luke Skywalker where Wayland was located and what they could expect to find there. They were inadvertently aided from the Imperial side by Imperial Colonel Clain Selid. Selid had discovered that Jorus C'baoth, whom Thrawn was using to guide his soldiers, had killed one of his generals. This led to C'baoth being placed under arrest in the Emperor's throne room in Wayland, but C'baoth had enough time to send soldiers to kill the Salamiri that were keeping him contained. This took the force-dampening Salamiri out of the equation, which was good for Skywalker and his team. Leia Organa, however, didn't know the Salamiri had been dispatched, so when she learnt of their existence, she quickly followed Skywalker to Mount Tantiss, fearing Mara Jade was leading her brother into an Imperial trap. While she was en route to Wayland, Luke Skywalker, Mara Jade, Chewbacca, Han Solo, and Lando Calrissian landed on the tropical world and began trekking through the dense forest toward Mount Tantiss. Along the way, they met a group of Noghri death commandos who had come to help the son of Darth Vader, as well as some of the native sentient species, the Menarshi and Psadans. The latter, Skywalker convinced to stay neutral, though some of the Menarshi decided to join forces with him. When they eventually reached the facility, a platoon of stormtroopers attacked him. The task force split into two teams. Skywalker and Jade split off in the search of the facility's remote destruction control, while Chewbacca and Calrissian went in search of a different way to destroy the fortress. Calrissian, it turns out, was able to rig an arrhythmic resonance scheme within the cloning chambers that, when activated, would do enough damage to bring the mountain down. But the New Republic team had other problems. As Jade and Skywalker progressed through the facility, they reached the throne room where Jorus C'baoth awaited them. But he wasn't alone. With him stood Luke Skywalker, a perfect clone of Luke that had been created from DNA collected from his severed hand that Vader had presented to Palpatine so many years ago. The two pairs dueled, with Skywalker taking on Skywalker while Jade unsuccessfully tried to hold off C'baoth. That's when Organa and Solo entered the throne room. With reinforcements arriving, C'baoth unleashed a force scream that stunned everyone. Everyone except Mara Jade, who seized the opportunity to force pull Leia's lightsaber to her hand and, with it, execute the clone of Luke Skywalker, thus fulfilling Palpatine's final order to her. Enraged by the loss of his puppet clone, C'baoth raised his arms, using the Force to bring the ceiling down on top of them all. Once again, using Organa's lightsaber, however, Jade was able to cut holes in the floor, letting the debris fall harmlessly through. With Leia guiding her mentally, she wove through the falling rocks and reached C'baoth, whom she finally put out of his misery. With the Imperial opposition neutralized, the New Republic team exited the facility, then used the scheme Calrissian had rigged up to bring it down. With his cloning facility destroyed, Thrawn was no longer able to mass produce his army. But this wasn't the only thing the New Republic had up its sleeves. With Thrawn bearing down on the core and the secret mission to Wayland underway, the New Republic let him take system after system while they put together an emergency defense at Bilbringi in the Inner Rim. With defeat looming above their heads, the newly released Admiral Ackbar had one hope. He was pinning the New Republic's hopes on a CGT array, a crystal gravfield trap that they could use to detect the cloaked asteroids blockading the capital and thus end the siege of Coruscant. But the New Republic didn't own a CGT. They knew of one, however, located in the Bilbringi shipyards. So Ackbar turned his sights on the planet. So, the New Republic prepared a vast assault fleet hoping for a second Endor, while Thrawn laid a trap. Each side was ready to strike the other down once and for all, and it would all be decided above Bilbringi, the final battle site of the Thrawn campaign. Thrawn and his forces were the first to arrive at Bilbringi, guided there by the Admiral's tactical evaluation of the New Republic's current needs. With him, Thrawn brought all of his interdictor cruisers and star destroyers, planning on using their gravity well projectors to trap the New Republic fleet as they arrived. And exactly as Thrawn had predicted, the New Republic fleet came. But when they dropped out of hyperspace, Admiral Ackbar and Commander Tantiss realized that instead of dropping in above the Imperial shipyards, they had exited too early, arriving outside the Bilbringi perimeter. This turned out to be a blessing, as ahead lay Thrawn's fleet, interdictors perfectly positioned to block any escape. It was a trap. Thrawn ordered the two interdictor cruisers furthest from the main fleet, the Sentinel and the Constrainer, to secure from entrapment duty and return to the demarcation line where the rest of the fleet could protect them. Then, with his forces gathered and ready, he ordered the attack on the New Republic fleet. The way Thrawn had arrayed his forces was in a semi-sphere, with the interdictors forming the edges of the formation. Despite the initial inconvenience of the New Republic fleet being just out of their perimeter, the Imperial fleet took to the attack quickly and efficiently, hammering away at the New Republic vessels. The New Republic, on the other hand, was caught by surprise and was slow to react. From the beginning, the space battle was going decidedly in Thrawn's favor, but there was something Thrawn hadn't foreseen. There was a third party who had secretly involved themselves in the events at Bilbringi. The Smugglers' Alliance, which was exactly what the name suggests, had already infiltrated the Imperial shipyards in the hopes of stealing the CGT. When the battle broke out, however, they decided they benefited the most by Thrawn losing, and so they joined in on the side of the New Republic. With the help of Rogue Squadron, they attacked the Imperial shipyards directly, overpowering the 4 Imperial Golan 2 platforms that were defending the yards with the suddenness and speed of their attack. The Imperial defenses buckled, and the New Republic took its chance to turn the tide of the battle. To deal with their rear defense cracking, Thrawn had to recall some of his fleet back to the shipyards to protect them. Despite this turn of fortune, Thrawn was still optimistic that they would prevail. His optimism lasted until his very last moments, giving way to confusion as his personal bodyguard, a Noghri named Rook, whom Star Wars Rebel fans will be intimately familiar with, assassinated him. During his campaign, Thrawn had made extensive use of the Noghri Death Commandos, deploying them as bodyguards and assassins. The Noghri had originally pledged their services to Darth Vader, who they believed had saved their world, Honega, from annihilation as a result of a bioweapon spilled during the Clone Wars. In reality, the Empire had been working to prevent Honoghr from recovering to ensure the dependence of the Noghri on Imperial relief. Leia, who the Noghri honoured as the Lady of Vader, had discovered this on a mission to Honoghr, and once she revealed the truth to the Noghri, they turned against the Empire, exacting their revenge by helping the New Republic take Wayland and by assassinating Grand Admiral Thrawn. While the space battle above Bilbringi was underway, Pellaeon received a transmission from Wayland informing the Admiral the facility had fallen to the New Republic. As the transmission played, revealing that Noghri had helped the New Republic, Rook disabled first the captain, then thrust his knife into Thrawn's chest where he sat atop his command throne. The Admiral's optimism turned into confusion, and with a quiet breath of disbelief, noting how artistically done the assassination was, he died. Although Rook was subsequently killed and command of the Chimera fell to Pellaeon, Captain knew the battle was lost. Despite the two fleets being fairly evenly matched in numbers, without Thrawn's tactical genius supporting their fleet, he knew he couldn't win the day. Instead of throwing away all their lives, he called an immediate retreat, bringing what was left of the Imperial fleet into the unknown regions. With the New Republic victory at Bilbringi, the greatest threat they faced had been eliminated. With the CGT secured, the New Republic was finally able to remove the cloaked asteroids from around Coruscant, liberating the capital once more. After a hard-earned victory, they could finally relax for a brief time. But despite its positive outcome, the Thrawn campaign alone had come at a devastating amount of loss. To quote Admiral Ackbar, the New Republic sustained considerable losses in the Thrawn campaign. 10% of our forces killed, 30% wounded, but those are just averages. On the worlds Thrawn actually hit, the devastation was significant. The Thrawn campaign saw the New Republic losing a third of its territory to Thrawn and 40% of its forces, leaving it stretched even thinner than before. Additionally, it fractured the fledgling government even more, allowing for problematic new figures to rise in prominence, while entire sectors like the Mid-Rim stewed in resentment toward the New Republic for their inability to defend them against Thrawn. Worse still, defeating Thrawn was not the respite the New Republic had thought it would be. The worst was yet to come. The problem with legends like Thrawn is that, even when you cut them down, there's still enough to inspire others to rise up and try to imitate them, which is precisely what several Imperial Warlords try to do in 10 ABY. Inspired by Thrawn's many successes, the 6 surviving Imperial Warlords banded together and formed the Imperial Coalition within days of the Admiral's death, which was secretly backed by the reborn Emperor. The Imperial Coalition, supported by the Emperor's inner circle, gathered their fleet and launched an explosive assault on the galactic core, catching the New Republic completely by surprise. Still licking its wounds after the Thrawn campaign and with its fleet occupied in the Outer Rim, the New Republic was unable to defend the core and could do little but watch helplessly as the Imperial forces dug their way deep into the heart of the New Republic, taking key worlds like SLS, Chandrila and Raltir until, once more, they had made their way to Coruscant. With the impending Imperial attack, Mon Mothma, the New Republic Chief of State, began scrambling to draw up a defense strategy to protect the capital. But she didn't make it in time. General Alex Balin, the Imperial officer in charge of the assault, set his forces around the planet and began bombarding the planetary energy shields, dealing significant damage to the Ecumenopolis below. The Imperials' first target was Coruscant's communications centers. After they had taken the comms out, Coruscant was effectively cut off from the rest of the galaxy, unable to get word out that they had been attacked. A desperate effort to contact the remaining fleet was made by sending out several courier ships, including the Messenger, to try and break the Imperial blockade. With the Imperials bearing down on the planetary defenses, Mon Mothma ordered the evacuation of the planet. The Imperials had already taken the capital center, forcing the New Republic forces into a guerrilla war. But the Imperial victory was short-lived. With the former capital of the Galactic Empire secured, the Imperial Coalition and Ruling Council decided that it was time to assemble a new Imperial Senate to govern the Empire and serve the Emperor. This was, in theory, a good plan, but infighting soon followed. The various Moffs, Grand Moffs, and governors agreed, but it was their understanding that they would be granted a seat on the Senate, with votes weighted to represent the number of worlds under their control. They had, after all, remained loyal after all this time, retained their forces, and answered the Empire's call in retaking the core. However, the councillors refused. Granting every Moff and Admiral a seat on the Senate would essentially create a decentralized power base, with the power shared out equally among the local rulers. Faced with these irreconcilable differences in political vision, the Imperials did what Imperials do best and turned on one another. The Imperial military tried to seize power, but even within the military, a schism between the army and navy made things difficult. The navy was insisting they could choose a new supreme commander without the army's input. Meanwhile, the military bureaucrats and Compnor were affirming that any changes to the new order would invalidate the Empire's existence. To explain this point a little further, this was a question of constitutional legitimacy. In the eyes of these military men, any change to the new order, essentially the Galactic Empire's constitution, would illegitimize anything they built. By changing the constitution without proper procedure, others would then be able to deny the Empire they were reforming. While constitutional legitimacy is a crucial point when a government is forming after a revolution, we wouldn't call the Empire legitimate to begin with, so to us, this point is moot. To the members of the army, however, it was not. These fanatics staged a coup in the name of their Empire's legitimacy. Faced with said coup, the ISB and Imperial intelligence went on an assassination spree to purge the ranks. But this conflict didn't just stay behind bureaucratic doors. Open warfare soon broke out among the streets of Coruscant, with one Imperial faction turning on another. 3 sector groups straight up wiped each other out in orbit, and the 2 factions of the Imperial military turned on one another, destroying much of Coruscant in the process. The Imperial Civil War, as it came to be known, didn't stay on Coruscant either. When word got out to Imperial forces elsewhere in the galaxy, the different factions stationed there also turned on one another, leading to thousands of casualties. As bad as the Imperial Civil War was for the people of Coruscant and its infrastructure, this was, of course, an opportunity for the New Republic to take advantage of the chaos and deal some damage. They relied on 2 captured Star Destroyers to conduct raids on various Imperial territories, including one over Coruscant. This one, however, ended in disaster when the New Republic-controlled Star Destroyer Liberator, commanded by Lando Calrissian, Luke Skywalker, and Wedge Antilles, was attacked and forced to crash land on the devastated planet. With such valuable members of their ranks at stake, the New Republic had to attempt to rescue, despite how dangerous such a mission would be. A task force was organized under the command of Leia Organa, her husband Han Solo, Chewbacca, and C-3PO. May his name not be used in vain. It was a small force of 3 ships, with the Millennium Falcon in command, and the Rebel Star and Antares 6, 2 Nebulan B escort frigates, as support, commanded by Captain Neva and Captain Snung. Upon exiting hyperspace, the 3 ships came face to face with an unprecedented ship graveyard, the evidence of a large-scale battle above the capital. This was the wreckage caused by the Imperial Civil War, as those 3 sector groups destroyed each other. Unfortunately, the 3 New Republic ships hadn't anticipated the veritable minefield they would jump into, and Neva's frigate, the Rebel Star, almost instantly collided with some of the space debris and was destroyed. The Antares 6 was ordered to wait in orbit while the Falcon descended toward the planet's surface. During their descent through the atmosphere, the Falcon ran into a squadron of elite HAL runners, but instead of engaging the New Republic ship, the Imperial fighters chose to leave the war-torn city behind. Following the Liberator's coordinates, the Millennium Falcon headed straight for Imperial City. The Imperial Command Center had seen better days. The various Imperial factions were still actively at war with one another, destroying both Imperial infrastructure and personnel in their bid for power. The task force found the wreckage of the Liberator near the old Imperial Palace. The ship was under siege, with the surviving crew members trying to hold off against a unit of AT-ATs that were assailing the downed vessel. From aboard the Millennium Falcon, the 2 solos quickly dispatched the AT-ATs, then landed near the wreckage. They were greeted by Calrissian and Antilles alongside all the surviving crew members. However, Luke Skywalker wasn't with them. He had sensed the dark side from within the Imperial Palace and left the New Republic team to deal with everything while he went to investigate. All of a sudden, an armored tank and several war droids descended on them, run by a gang of smugglers out to salvage what they could. They began looting the Falcon, using a number of vicious necks to distract them while they stole what they could. Leia, however, who had been receiving training in the Force, used her abilities to stun, then yeet the animals, while her husband used his blaster pistols to hold off the animals and droids. Before they were overwhelmed, Skywalker rejoined them, using his abilities to clean the battle up, mopping the floor with any war droids and the one remaining AT-AT walker. The reunion and small victory would have been a cause for celebration, but Luke had terrible news to share. Somehow, Palpatine had returned. The dark side presence he had sensed within the Imperial Palace had belonged to Palpatine, who was using his twisted abilities to create a massive hyperspace wormhole. Said hyperspace wormhole was forming in orbit above Coruscant, a malevolent twisting of dark side energy that descended upon the surface and began carving a path of destruction across Coruscant City. Realizing it was targeting him specifically, Skywalker ordered his companions to retreat and leave him behind. Despite their protests, the task force and New Republic survivors fled the planet aboard the Millennium Falcon and, with the Antares 6 in tow, jumped to safety. Meanwhile, Luke remained standing in place, facing the wormhole head-on as it drew ever closer. Before long, it had reached his location and, with a hum of energy, funneled him through space-time on board an Imperial dungeon ship bound for Biss. In the aftermath of the Second Battle of Coruscant, as this ordeal later became known, Imperial ships from across the galaxy and from every faction involved in the Imperial Civil War began retreating into the deep core. Although he had allowed the weak to take each other out, as Palpatine phrased it, the Emperor did finally make his return known to the galaxy at large, and under his banner, Imperial ships began organizing in the deep core, then executing raids on various New Republic worlds. From their base on Dar Sucha 5, the New Republic found themselves suddenly facing down an Emperor reborn, an empire once more nestled deep into the heart of New Republic territory and an uphill battle that seemed to never end. They had fought so hard. For over a decade, they had fought tooth and claw to regain what the Emperor had stolen from them, triumphing again and again despite the odds stacked heavily against them. But in those short months after the end of the Thrawn campaign, every victory they had achieved was essentially undone. Palpatine had returned, Coruscant was lost, and the future of the New Republic had never seemed more uncertain. The Legends account of the Galactic Civil War is a tale as painful as canon, with stories of individuals realizing their full potential, either to do good in the world or evil. It's full of stories of painful losses and jubilant victories, assurances that no matter how dark the situation looks, there is always hope. But Legends doesn't let that hope shine bright. It reminds you that, at any time, what you've worked for can be stripped away from you at a moment's notice. Despite this sobering lesson, it's human nature to keep on fighting, clinging on to hope no matter how small it may be. In the days and years following Palpatine's return, the New Republic didn't simply roll over and accept their fate. They kept fighting on because they had to, because it was necessary, because it mattered, and because they wanted to see the galaxy a free place once more. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Legends. We hope you enjoyed the ride, and if you have any favorite moments or questions, we hope to hear from you in the comments section below. As always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.